Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad you've joined us this evening for Unveiling Your Money Story, Understanding the Roots of Your Financial Behavior. We're very, very excited at Bloomfield Public Library to welcome back Rahkim Sabree. He is an author, columnist, and financial coach who focuses on the intersection of financial education and financial trauma as a barrier to achieving financial empowerment. He often discusses the impact of his early experiences with poverty on his relationship with money. He also dives into the nuances of financial trauma, culture, and race, and their impact on the wealth gap in the Black community. So we're really happy to have Rakim back with us today. So thank you for taking the time to be here, and we're excited to learn with you.
Yes, thank you for having me back. So I'm going to actually share my screen so you guys can see the lovely presentation that I prepared for you. Okay. So my name is Rahkim Sabree. You may be familiar with me and my work because of the last partnership that myself and the Bloomfield Public Library had. But if you are not familiar with who I am, I'm a financial therapist slash financial coach. I've had over 10 years of experience in financial services, starting in the banking industry, actually. I am an accredited financial counselor, so that is a new designation from the last time you might have seen me. That is a designation through the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education. I'm a trauma of money certified practitioner. That's also a new certification through the trauma of money program. So previously, I would talk about some of these topics, these financial topics, through a trauma-informed lens without using that language. Now I can use that language with confidence because a lot of the conversation that we will have about money stories can be tied into your relationship with money by way of financial trauma. And so I want to be conscious of using the right vocabulary and the right approaches to having these conversations. I'm a Forbes columnist, pretty active Forbes columnist. Previously, I've written for Business Insider, Money.com, Black Enterprise, Entrepreneur, The Griot, and many others. I've decided to kind of consolidate that down into one column with Forbes. And as you can tell, I'm an author, speaker, and consultant on this topic. So we're going to jump in. I am praying for you guys' engagement, but we're going to go deep and talk about some of the events and experiences that shape how we view money today, what our money story is, and how we can shift what that looks like moving into the future. Okay, so if you have not heard the phrase money story, I like to talk about it through the lens of what it is that you see, hear, were told, or experienced as a child. So these are all factors that are going to influence the money story that you come from. These are things that you tell yourself about money. They may be tied into some of the self-esteem that you might have when it comes to money, whether or not you deserve to have money, whether or not you're allowed to spend money, what you're allowed to spend money on. I will talk about the impact of culture on some of the creation of these money stories as we move through this presentation. But I want to break them down into these different lenses. So when we talk about what we see related to money, many times our beliefs around money are pretty determined by the time we're 7 years old. So if we think about between the ages of 3 and 7, what the experiences or things that we might have observed our parents talking about or doing, just being in the back seat or playing in the playroom or being at the dinner table. When we think about what it is that we witnessed around money, those things shape how we view money or how the relationship that we have with money or the story that we tell ourselves about money as an adult. going into hearing. So a lot of times people will witness, as children, will witness their parents arguing about money. If that's true of you, certainly I can raise my hand and speak to that. If that's true of you, that is not a unique experience. Many people hear their parents arguing about money. In fact, I believe one of the number one causes of divorce is related to finances. So when we hear that there is discord relating to money, there are different values or beliefs around the role of money in relationships or the role of money within the household, we internalize that and we might think, or we might rather adopt ideas around scarcity or abundance based off of what we hear. If we are in the car with our mom or our dad and we drive past McDonald's and we say, "Hey, dad, mom, I want McDonald's." And our parents respond to us with, "Well, do you have McDonald's money?" That is an ongoing joke within certain communities around the shared experience of being told that, we have food at home, or do you have McDonald's money? But that can start to develop a mindset of scarcity when it comes to, I see something that I want, I don't understand why I can't have it. And of course, I don't have the money to buy it, but these are the things that I'm being told. So either we don't have enough to get the things that we need or to get the things that we want. As children, we might confuse what it is that we need with what it is that we want. We're seeing McDonald's, we're interpreting that as food. So we're thinking we need food. Why can't we get food? Versus, what's at home, or why do we have to eat the same things all of the time? Or why does my friends get to go to McDonald's when they get out of school or when they finish soccer practice or what have you, but we can't? Children rather, start to compare themselves socially based off of what it is that they hear their friends and other peers have access to that maybe they don't. And so we have to be careful when we're engaging with children, if we are parents of children or older adults in children's lives, around what it is that we say to them or what it is that we allow them to hear, specifically as it relates to money, because those experiences will also shape the money story that they tell themselves later. I want to pause here and have you think about, so far, we talked about seeing, we talked about hearing. What are some of the things that you saw? So these are all passive interactions. What are some of the things that you saw and heard when it comes to money that may have shaped your ideas or your behaviors around money moving forward? So I'm going to look in the chat. I see someone shared, I was definitely impacted by my mother shopping and then hiding all of her purchases from my dad. That is something that you would see. And actually, that can lead into one of my favorite topics, experiences of financial trauma. Um, Specifically as it relates to financial therapy, financial therapists see individual partners who are experiencing what would be considered financial infidelity. So that's an example of financial infidelity. We're hiding purchases, we're hiding some of the spending decisions, we're hiding debt from our partners, and we're making decisions without including our partners in those decision-making processes, which can create discord within the relationship. So I appreciate that share. I also want to talk about, when we talk about the two parents and those interactions and some of the discord that I've seen in my financial therapy practice. Those money stories they don't, because you get married, they don't just absorb into one money story. A lot of times in partnerships, you have two parents who are navigating their own views, their own behaviors, their own relationships, their own stories about money, and they're trying to coexist in an environment where there's kind of that tug of war around how we spend money. What is the role of money in the household? What is the best use of money in this particular instance? And so if one parent, for an example, comes from an environment or a background where they experienced a lot of scarcity, And so they have a scarcity mentality. They're seeking security by hoarding. They're seeking security by holding on to. They're seeking security by making sure that they get the deal when the deal goes on sale, because it may not go on sale again. Even though we know the science of marketing is at play, and consumerism, a culture of consumerism really is what drives us in today's society, we still fall for these traps that say it's 80% off, but only for the next 2 hours. We feel prompted to make a decision in that moment, even if it's not the most rational decision, due to some of those experiences or perspectives that are rooted in maybe the scarcity that we experienced growing up, or this manufactured scarcity that we're seeing used in the advertisements that we are exposed to, right? And advertisements have grown over, or rather, the science of advertising has grown over my lifetime, certainly, where I remember turning the TV on and seeing the commercials in between the shows that I really wanted to watch, or going into the stores and seeing how, the setups were done, these traditional methods for advertising. Now you have children as young as 5, maybe younger, who are stuck on their devices. And so they're watching YouTube, or they're on social media, or even ourselves, we're scrolling on social media, and every other post we're seeing an ad, or every other article that we're reading, we're seeing an ad. More than that, we're seeing ads based off of conversations that we might have had earlier in the day. Or there's a going joke, certainly within my friend group, sometimes ads will pop up for products that we just thought about. We're like, how is Apple reading our mind? Or how is Google reading our mind? And so really a lot of our desire or our wants for products come from a manufactured scarcity, or the science of marketing and advertising in telling you that you need this product in order to feel better, in order to be better, in order to be desired, et cetera, et cetera. And so even when we have the fully developed brains that we do as an adults, we have a hard time with that. So think about the impact of just hearing some of these conversations, or being in the room when some of these conversations are taking place as children. Think about not having the vocabulary to understand that mom and dad are not on the same page because they have two completely different backgrounds. And so mom is a saver and a planner, and dad is a spender. And he's like, I need it right now. I want it for whatever this reason is. And maybe their way of demonstrating affection towards you as a child, or towards each other, is tied into how expensive the gift they bought you were, or how frequently they buy you gifts, or how many gifts you get for your birthday. I certainly remember instances when I was growing up where I would get a birthday present, but I would have to pick one. Like, okay, you get one thing. What's the one thing that you want? And so you have to kind of decide between, again, as a kid, trying to figure out, well, what are the things that I want versus what are the things that I need? And even in trying to, determine something as delicate as that in my youth, I had to prioritize, well, this is something that I really want right now, but this is something that might last me for a lot longer, right? A pair of sneakers is going to last me for a lot longer than a pizza party. And so those lessons, those messages, those observations that we have through what we see and what we hear impact how we decide to interact with money later on. On the second half of this slide here, we also have um, more direct experiences, right? What are the things that we were told? Were we given any lessons when it comes to money? What are the do's and the don'ts around money? How many people were told, save your money, right? But we didn't have a reason, we didn't know what the reason was why we were being told to save. And I gave the example of, do you have McDonald's money? So that's more of a direct impact of conversation, right? You're talking to your parents and they're telling you, do you have McDonald's money? That they're driving this idea of scarcity. I know for a long time in my own life, I thought about saving. I continue to be an excellent saver. not because I've mastered the discipline of saving or because there was like this emphasis placed on saving changing my life. It was simply because I was told as a child, you have to save your money. But I was never told as a child what I'm saving my money for. And so I would go through these cycles, and I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to. I would go through these cycles where I would save for the goal, whatever that goal was, insert vacation, insert new technology, insert TV, insert trip, insert experience, whatever that is. And you would get to that dollar amount and you would feel a sense of pride associated with being able to accomplish that goal. And then you would empty your savings on the thing that you were saving for. How many people can relate to that experience? And so as you go into those cycles of saving and then spending and then saving and then spending, what's happening is you are not keeping anything for yourself. You are not growing the money that you're putting away. You're an excellent saver, but you don't have anything to show for it, but the memories or of those experiences or the items that you accumulated that you may or may not use in your everyday now. And so when we have conversations around financial education and the importance of saving, and I don't want to minimize the importance of saving, but saving by itself is a step towards something else. When we talk about the importance of saving, we also have to follow up that statement with the why. You are saving so that you can accomplish XYZ short-term goal or XYZ long-term goal, but you are also saving so that you can have something for your own later in life. You're saving as a step towards investing. You're saving not just for the sake of saving or doing the exercise, but you're saving for a purpose. And usually that purpose is tied to being able to grow your wealth through increasing your net worth, which touches on the topic of investing, which touches on the topic of long-term planning, which touches on the topic of healthcare, which touches on the topic of education, right? So we're saving for things that will eventually happen, that we know will eventually happen at some point in our life. Now, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you guys. Are you ready? What if you don't believe that you are going to live a very long life? What if you don't believe that you'll make it to retirement age? Or you don't even believe that you'll make it till 30? If we're having conversations, and this is more for, or as a rebuttal to traditional approaches to financial education, where you might have a financial professional come and say, you need to save for retirement. You need to open up that retirement account and plan for your retirement. If people don't believe that they're going to live to reap the benefits of that retirement, then there's no incentive for them to save. And so as we move through this presentation, I'm going to talk about understanding your values and determine, as a financial professional, my job and the job of other financial professionals is to help you identify and determine what those values are in comparison to those goals. So the last thing on this slide, so I do want to move on, is our lived experiences. What are the things that we actually experienced? What did we see? Or rather, we talked about, this is kind of the combination of what we talked about before. What did we see? What did we hear? What were we told? How did that make us feel in that moment, right? You can't, you're a talented musician and you can't get the lessons, the private lessons that your peers can because there's not enough money. You're a talented basketball player, but you can't go to the basketball camp because there's not enough money. These experiences can put a damper on your joy, your passion, your skill in these areas, and may, in some instances, discourage you from even wanting to continue to pursue it because it's just a lot harder. Some people will thrive in those environments where there's lack, and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to make a way out of no way. But that's not the case for everybody. And then if we could get into some more harsh or painful experiences that some of our peers or ourselves directly might have experienced, right? I remember coming home and the lights wouldn't turn on, right? I remember coming home and we didn't have any hot water. We had to boil water in order to bathe. I remember coming home and seeing eviction notices on the door. These are experiences from my childhood, but I was old enough to understand what was going on. And I was old enough to be impacted by those experiences because I was directly experiencing. I was walking away and saying, man, I have to boil this pot of water in order to take a bath or take a cold bath. I don't want to take a cold bath, so I'm going to sit here and wait for this water to boil. Or I have to light a candle in order for me to see throughout the house when it's dark when it's dark outside, because there's no natural light coming in and we don't have any lights, or we have flashlights, right? Certainly we can turn these into fun games, and people do turn it into more uh an experience that they can cope with because they don't have a choice. Nobody wants to live in this way, but these experiences will inform your behaviors later in life. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, but I'm also going to check the chat because I saw it was pretty active. So funny comment here. I have learned the secret to successful marriage is separate bank accounts. And it's funny because I've worked in financial services for a long time. I've seen everything when it comes to couples. I've seen shared bank accounts work successfully. I've seen separate bank accounts work successfully. I've seen separate bank accounts with shared access. So the husband has access to the wife's bank account. The wife has access to the husband's bank account, but they don't touch each other's account. They don't spend each other's money. I've seen situations where my money is your money and your money is my money, and we're going to do this money thing together. I've seen some of the uglier sides of those relationships where there's hidden bank accounts, or where there's bank accounts that are angled or positioned in such a way that brother and sister are on the account, but husband and wife can't be. So what's happening on brother and sister's account is not visible to the wife or to the husband in that particular instance, right? And so people go to great lengths to conceal some of the transactions that they have, or that they make, for a variety of different reasons. And we don't want to shame anybody for the way that they choose to navigate their finances, in a partnership or alone. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of stigma around how people use their money to cope with their experience in whatever ways that look. The only time that we become concerned and we demonstrate that concern is when those behaviors are harmful to the individual or to somebody else, right? So in financial therapy or in financial counseling, I might have a client who is struggling with paying their bills and uncover in going through their transactions with them that the reason why they're struggling with paying their bills is because they have a gambling addiction. They're constantly gambling, but it's their gambling is their way of blowing off steam, right? This is their way of relaxing after a hard week, or maybe they have an alcohol addiction, or maybe they're spending it on something else. And so we, as a financial therapist, don't diagnose individuals. We will make referrals to mental health professionals that can help them with mental health related issues, but we are able to identify that these are patterns that are getting in the way of what it is that you have articulated to me is your goal. So how do we fix this? And so I would say the secret to a successful marriage, and I'm not a married person, as a joke, is do what works for you. If it works for you to have separate bank accounts, great. If it works for you to have a combined bank account, great. I think these conversations should be had often and early. And so making sure that both individuals are on the same page or have shared values, and we're getting ready to get into that now, but have shared values as it relates to the role of money in their relationship. Because sometimes people view money through the lens of power. How much control do I have over the other person? How much control do I have within the household? Who gets to make the final decision when it comes to things that impact what your lifestyle or survival looks like? And those tend to be, or can be, I will say, um, borderline abusive or sometimes absolutely directly abusive interactions. And so I talked about financial infidelity a little bit earlier. The only time that financial infidelity should not be viewed through a negative lens is when the individual is being abused, right? They're being abused. They want to get out of their abusive situation. So they are hiding portions of their income so that they can save so they can get out. This person is being abused financially or physically. And so they are hiding their transactions because they don't want to upset their partner. In these instances, certainly we would want to encourage the individual to seek out help. But ultimately, it is a matter between those partners. And so we can just give them the vocabulary to describe what's happening and help them, again, shift their values and their goals if that's their desire. Another great question in the chat: do you believe in love languages? And then there was reference to gift giving. So yes, I'm familiar with the science of love languages and acts of service, giving gifts. Those are things that can show up with with your finances that can have an impact on your finances. If you are somebody who gives gifts to demonstrate your affection, you will be spending more on gifts. Or acts of service can be tied into money. So um, you might miss out on an opportunity to make money so that you can spend time or perform an act of service for your partner, and they don't recognize how important it was to you to make that money, and by sacrificing that you wanted to demonstrate the significance of whatever act of service that you are providing to them. And so they get frustrated because they're like, man, I could have done this and I could have been making money. I could have stayed and got some overtime and made some more money, but instead I wanted to, do something for you. And so I think it is important for us to look at all of these things through a holistic lens, and certainly through a financial lens, because everything impacts everything else. There are a couple of other comments in the chat, but I'm going to pause there and just kind of work through this presentation and get back to it. So let's have a conversation about values, specifically culture and values. So when I say the word culture, most times your association is going to probably center around the way that somebody looks, the way that they practice their spirituality, their form of spirituality or religion, maybe the language that they speak. But culture is much broader than geographic origin, ethnicity, language, religion, etc. Culture, we are experiencing many cultures at one time. If you think about the culture of your workplace, whether or not you can wear jeans, whether or not you're required to wear a uniform, whether or not you have to show up in a dress shirt and a tie, those are aspects of your workplace culture that are going to influence how you show up. We have a culture around sports, right? There's sports culture. So if you are a fan of a sports team, you might wear their jerseys, you might adopt their rivalries. As somebody who grew up in New York, I wear the New York Yankee fitted. I'm not a Yankee fan per se, but somebody who's a Boston Red Sox fan is going to see me wearing my Yankee fitted and they're going to say, boo, you like the Yankees, right? Hopefully that's the extent of the interaction. I've seen some interactions get a little bit more aggressive, but that is sports culture or geographic culture, right? Because I'm looking at culture through the lens of I'm wearing this fitted to represent that I'm from New York, and somebody else is looking at what I'm wearing as you represent the rivalry of my team, my chosen team. I'm not really interested in baseball, but they're perceiving it through that lens. We also have religious culture, right? What is the religion that we grew up in? Do we still subscribe to the beliefs and the practices that we grew up in? How do those beliefs and practices influence our diet? Influence whether or not we drink alcohol? Influence marriage and who we choose for partners? I talked about how we have access to all of these advertisements through our phones. We live in and we interact in this digital age culture where everybody has to be on social media in order to interact with one another, in order to keep up with other people's lives, in order to watch your nephew who lives 1,000 miles away from you grow up. And so there is a social media culture. And within that social media culture, certainly a boom of the consumerism culture that we all buy into based off of the way that we're fed all of these ads and marketing, right? So when I talk about culture through the lens of these subcultures that we navigate, it's important for us to recognize that we are all experiencing intersectional identities, even if we come from the same place, even if we speak the same language, even if we look the same, we dress the same, we practice the same religion, if even if everything was exactly the same, there can be differences based off of the impact of the cultures that we navigate. Educational culture, right? Certain conversations or certain communities or societies are going to be formed based off of the level of education that you have. Socioeconomic culture, right? The list goes on and on. And so when we talk about our values, I have here on the slide, your cultural influences will impact your values, and your values will impact your goals. So if I ask everybody in the audience to raise their hand and tell me who wants to be a millionaire, no pun intended, right? For the show, who wants to be a millionaire? Who wants to be a millionaire? A good portion of the people in the audience are going to raise their hands. But do we know why we want to be a millionaire? Is being a millionaire necessary for us to experience our versions of financial freedom? If we had $1 million, what will we do with that $1 million? Right? Is there a difference between being a millionaire and having $1 million in the bank and being a millionaire and having $1 million net worth? Right? So all of these questions are rhetorical questions, but they're questions that I want you to think about when we talk about culture and the impact of culture on your values. Because when I ask the question, what would you do with $1 million? Your cultural influences are going to dictate whether or not you decide that you want to go and buy a house, whether or not you decide that you want to pay off debt, whether you decide that you want to buy the nicest, newest car, whether you decide that you want to start a nonprofit and feed the homeless. The cultural influences are going to show up in what it is that you value and ultimately your behavior related to what your financial situation looks like. And this is an issue that I see with people across the wealth spectrum, right? It doesn't matter how much money or how little money you make, it matters that your culture is influencing what, or is going to have an influence on what you do with that money, how you assign value to that money. Does money represent power for you? Does money represent control? Does money represent security? Does money represent freedom? Your culture is going to influence, or the cultures that you navigate is going to influence those values. And again, those values are going to impact your goals. So when we talk about goals and goal setting, this is a favorite area of mine when I work with individuals one-on-one. A lot of times people come in and they'll have these like outlandish goals, right? I worked with a client recently. She was over 50, and she told me that she spent a significant portion of her career waitressing, right? So she's getting tips. She's not getting a retirement. She's not putting money away in a 401k. She just decided now, like, hey, I'm 50. I realize I'm supposed to be retiring soon, but I don't have anything planned for retirement. Can I start investing my money now and become a millionaire in a couple of years? And I'm like, not likely, right? Investing is a long game. And many of the people who benefit from the long game of investing have started early, have benefited from the compounding of what is it they're putting into their investments on a regular basis. And they're allowing those gains and that compounding to do the work for them so that when they are ready to retire, they have that there. So if you're starting late, then you're not going to have the same impact that somebody who started early is. It's not to say that investing is not important at an older age. That is just to say that you have missed out on the benefit of time in that interaction. And so her response to me in that particular instance was, one of disappointment. She's like, oh man, like I messed up. I should have made better choices. She goes into this like cycle of beating herself up. And so I stop her and I'm like, no, how did you decide that this was a goal of yours? What makes you decide today that this is something that needs to be done by the time you're retiring? Do you even want to retire? What does retirement look like for you? And as we started to uncover more of her experiences, her money story, she started to share with me more of her values. She realized that she doesn't really have a desire to retire. She just feels like she should retire because that's what she heard everybody else talking about. And I had to remind her that her choices over the last 30 years, whether they were conscious and intentional choices or choices that she made out of survival, to work in an industry where she was waitressing and she was making what she was making and not planning for retirement was her choice. And that there's no shame associated with that. She didn't have to beat herself up about the things that she didn't do yesterday or the things that she did do yesterday. She only has to acknowledge that this is where she is today, draw a line in the sand, and make a plan to change course if she wants to change courses, or double down in the path that she's doing, in the path that she's walking, rather. And so when we look at the role of culture and its impact on our values and the role of our values impact on our goals, we have to look at our patterns and behavior. A lot of times people are dealing with, and I have it listed here on the slide, financial stress, financial anxiety, nervous system regulation issues, retail therapy, some of the cultural norms that we navigate in workplace environments or social environments where we have to go and we have to buy the drink or two drinks, or maybe we're buying rounds for everybody, or maybe we're going to happy hour. These are all things that we are reacting to based off of some of the culture and the cultural norms that we navigate and that we accept. The biggest of which that I want to kind of isolate and point out is the culture of consumerism that is a byproduct of capitalism, right? A lot of times we will hear the word capitalism through the lens of something that is economic system, right? From an educational perspective, when we took our intro to economics, we learned what capitalism is. Sometimes we hear of capitalism through a lens that may be polarizing, right? We hear of it through a lens that may be evident of the exploitation of a particular working class. Whatever the case, capitalism and the way that we practice it is not something that is sustainable. And it's not an environment where everybody can win, right? The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. That is not accidental, that is 100% by design. And so, as a byproduct of capitalism, we are in an environment where we're constantly being told we need to consume, consume, consume. You're not good enough if you don't have this. You're not doing well in life if you don't have that. If you don't have this done by this age, you are a failure. These are messages that we hear, what messages that we internalize, messages that we see in our experience growing up from childhood to adulthood. So bringing you guys back to what is that we saw, what is that we heard, what is that we experienced, what is that we were told. These things continue to persist and to continue to be solidified over the course of our adolescent lives, so that when we become adults and we are fully in control or independent financially, we go into these same cycles. And so the reason why I bring up financial stress and financial anxiety and the nervous system regulation is because a lot of times when we're navigating our finances from this lens of fight or flight, we are perceiving a threat that is not a physical threat, right? It's not like a tiger is in front of us and we have to either run or fight this tiger. We are perceiving this threat in the back of our minds, right? We're experiencing the anxiety of, I don't have enough money to pay this bill right now. What do I do next? I can't pay my mortgage. What do I do next? Am I going to have enough money this next check to do the things that I want to do and the things that I need to do? Am I running on this hamster wheel cycle where I get paid and then by the end of As soon as I get paid, all the money's gone. Right. And so these prolonged environments of stress or anxiety, God forbid you miss a bill or two, and now you have to play catch up in addition to what is coming in directly. This cycle of stress and anxiety is your body reacting to the tiger that is not in front of you. And so when I talk about nervous system regulation or deregulation in these environments, what's happening is our body is responding and telling us that we need to fight or we need to fly, we need to move away, but we don't have the tools to get out of that situation. And so we are experiencing prolonged stress that can show up as financial trauma. We're experiencing prolonged anxiety that can show up as financial trauma, right? Because what do we do when we are dysregulated? We go and we try to regulate ourselves. How do we do that? We might go on a shopping spree. We might buy some alcohol. We might gamble. We might start demonstrating avoidant behaviors around our money, like not opening our bills, not checking our mail, not logging into our online banking. We're just like, well, whatever happens, happens. Like, I have to live in the moment, because if I'm not living in the moment, then I'm just going to get stressed out, and then I'll be stuck in the stress cycle. And so these things are all important. It's important for us to recognize as we are establishing goals for ourselves and as we are assessing what our values are, what are the patterns and behaviors that we are demonstrating or exhibiting that are going to interrupt rather what those goals look like. So if you say to me, I want to save $10,000 by the end of the year, and we create a plan and we say, okay, each month, this is how much you have to put away. By the end of the year, you will have a $10,000 if you adhere to this plan. But you also see that Beyonce is going on tour and she's stopping in Connecticut, and you pull from the money that you have put towards that $10,000. You're like, oh, I'm just going to borrow this and I'm going to pay it back. I'll double it next week. You are demonstrating a pattern or a behavior that is saying that you value, there's not anything wrong with this, they're saying that you value the experience of going to the Beyonce concert more than you value the goal that you have set for yourself of saving that $10,000. And so when you are faced with the clash of your values and your goals, it's not for anybody else to say you're a bad person because you didn't meet your goal, or it's not for you to give up because you didn't meet your goal. It's for you to recognize, okay, there's a clash here. This is something that's important to me. I value experiences. And so I'm not going to have shame in this experience. Maybe moving forward, what I'll do is I'll save for two different things. I'll save for the $10,000 goal and I won't touch it. So maybe I need to save less over a longer period of time. And I'll save for recreational expenditures like going to concerts or spending time with family and friends. But we want to put those three different phases together. I'm going to go back a couple of slides just so that you can have a reminder. We want to put together what are our money stories, right? So what is our relationship? What is our view? What is the story that we tell ourselves about money based off of our earlier experiences with money, starting at maybe as early as 3 and really kind of being solidified by the time that we're 7 years old throughout our adulthood? What is the impact of the culture and the cultures that we navigate on our values? What are our values and how do those impact our goals? And then also reminding you that you get to decide what your goals are. Nobody else does. So if it's not a goal of yours to go and retire at the retirement age, that's okay. Somebody else said that that's when you're supposed to retire. That's not a decision that you've made consciously for yourself. And then we want to look at the patterns and the behaviors that can interrupt those goals or that are in alignment or misalignment with the values that we have chosen for ourselves. And I think at this point, it's really important for me to underscore that, and this may be a controversial topic in the future, particularly with people who are driven by culture based off of region or based off of religion or based off of family practices. You get to choose whether or not you uphold the values that you grew up in. I'm going to repeat that. You get to choose whether or not you uphold the values that you grew up in. And so it's a different issue. It's a larger issue, right? Because you may alienate friends, you may alienate family, you may alienate members of your spiritual communities, of your educational communities, of the different communities that you navigate by choosing to go in a different direction. But it's important for you to recognize that you can choose to go in a different direction, especially after you receive information that says this may be a better way. And so, in choosing to shift your values to something that is more important to you, right? Maybe your values growing up was centered around survival, and your values today are centered around thriving, experiencing. I want to do things that make me happy. I want to do things that fill me with joy. I want to do things that, the money's not going to be here tomorrow. It's here right now. So I want to enjoy this money responsibly. You can choose to shift those values into something that are going to be more aligned with the goals that you have in the future. And so you get to kind of craft and be the master architect of the direction of what your financial life and your actual life look like by being conscious of these variables. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna zoom through this. It's important for you to acknowledge where the impact of your money story and whether or not this is something that you want to hold on to. So my money story growing up, as I shared with you in the beginning, was one of poverty, right? I experienced some poverty. I saw the eviction notices. I saw the lights were out. I saw that we didn't have any hot water. Those experiences made me extremely vigilant later in life. Once I started making money on my own, I said, oh no, I don't ever want to experience those things again. This can be considered a natural reaction to experiencing that trauma. You experience a trauma, just like you touch a hot oven and you get burned and you say, oh, I know not to touch that hot oven again. And I know that's an oversimplification, but just in the interest of time and clarity, we experience touching that hot oven sometimes when it comes to navigating our finances. Maybe we witness our parents max out their credit cards and we're like, nope, I saw the backlash that came from that. I am not going to even touch a credit card. Or sometimes our parents tell us, based off of the pain that they experience with their credit cards, you don't need a credit card. Don't take out a credit card. Those are things that influence your money story, and you get to decide for yourself whether or not you want to bring that into the future. So here's a call to action for you if you're so inclined. That's going to help shift your money story, or at the very least, make you more conscious of the money stories that you have adopted and that you want to maintain. Super important for you to reflect and journal, right? Where do you want to be versus where you are versus where you came from? Do you want to pull on some of those experiences, those early experiences, as inspiration or motivation to propel you further? Or are you allowing some of those earlier experiences to hold you back? It's important for you to reflect and journal. Identify and challenge some of the limiting beliefs that you might have. Limiting beliefs might sound like, well, I came from this socioeconomic background. And so because I came from this background, I will never get to a level of wealth that is outside of that. I cannot make more than X amount of dollars per year. I am not deserving of wealth. These are things that I've heard people tell me. So I'm not just making them up. These are things that I've heard people tell me. I don't think that I would be responsible for, I don't think that I would be responsible with money in excess of this particular amount. I don't believe that my skills are worth this dollar. Right. And so it's important for us to identify and challenge the limiting beliefs that tell us that we can't do or what we can't do and why we can't do the things that we want to do. Set specific financial goals. This is very important. I follow the SMART goals model. Many financial counselors and financial educators will do the same. It's not enough to say that you want to be a millionaire. you have to break down what does the path to becoming a millionaire look like. I asked the question earlier, does being a millionaire look like having $1 million or having $1 million net worth? If becoming a millionaire looks like having $1 million net worth, what are the assets that you can acquire to increase your net worth? And how can you pay off debt to decrease your liability line in determining your net worth so that your net worth is greater? In setting specific goals that are aligned to SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, you are more likely to accomplish those goals than to just create a Hail Mary. This is what I would like to have happen. I don't know how I'm going to get there. Creating an action plan is important. So what are the steps that you're going to take every day towards accomplishing those goals? What are the steps that you're going to take towards building out a community? So I'm talking about some of these other bullet points here, building out a support system or a community, or having mentors or financial professionals to help you navigate this journey. And then also, what does your commitment to continuous learning look like? That should be a part of your action plan as well. How often are you going to stay up to date on trends, products, services, strategies, professionals who are sharing information so that you can shift your money story into one that is more aligned to where you would like to be than where it is that you came from? Because again, we don't have a measure of control over our financial outcomes when we're 7 years old. But we are being influenced by the things that we see and that we hear and that we experience and that we're told. So we're doing sometimes decades worth of undoing and unlearning when we are crafting or rewriting our money story. But it all starts with being able to identify where those things started and how those things impact your relationship and your behaviors with money today. And so I believe we are at time. I have included my contact information, Instagram, my website, my email address, and my newsletter on Substack. There's also a QR code if you feel so inclined to take a picture and complete the survey that lets me know how I did in terms of the information that was shared today. I would greatly appreciate that. I'm going to look at the rest of these questions in the chat and give you some quick answers before I let you all go. One comment says, I have the emphasis on getting a job and working to have money, but no education about what to do with it. So yes, that is specifically related to when I talked about saving and just being told we need to save, but not being told why. And so I hope that this presentation helps kind of provide some context and vocabulary, not just for you in determining the why behind some of the financial decisions that you make, but also in the way that you communicate with others. If you are in a position to educate younger people or encourage younger people to exhibit positive financial habits, you don't want to give them half of the equation. You want to give them the full equation. It's important to save because ... There's also a comment here that says kids aren't supposed to hear about the adults' business. Yes, I definitely remember being told that stay out of grown folks' business, right? And so when sometimes we hear by accident or accidentally on purpose, right? Maybe our parents think that we're sleeping or they think that we're paying or we're not paying attention. We are being impacted by this curiosity to know what's going on. And so the call to action in that instance is that parents or individuals who are in a position to influence or a position of authority with children should be less secretive around what is going on from a money perspective. And not saying that you need to give them all of the drama, right? But you can give them high level understanding of the nuances of why this decision was made or what the intent behind that decision was, whatever that might be. Even if the situation is a painful experience, like ones that I described earlier, if I came home and there's no hot water and my mom, and I'm like, hey mom, like there's no hot water. Why is that? Having an honest conversation about, well, this is what happened when you don't pay the bill on time, or when you can't pay the bill on time, or we had to prioritize food over this experience. And certainly we want to make sure that those conversations are age appropriate, because we don't want to instill fear or create panic within children. I think a lot of times parents want to protect their children so much so that they shelter them and not allow them to experience or understand what is happening behind the scenes. So when they go out into the real world, they're shocked. Um, and then I have a last question here that I'll take, and I think this is a great one. Do you think Gen Z growing up with more access to instant gratification due to technology affects their relationship with money in a negative way? I think it was a phenomenal question because I think that it actually affects their relationship with money in both a positive and a negative way. So the younger generations having more access to information gives them more access to financial education than was previously maybe shared or disseminated among young people in the past, right? Young people are going on TikTok, they're going on Instagram, they're going on YouTube to learn about trading, to learn about the stock market before they're even legally able to open up their own accounts and be custodians of their own accounts. This is huge, especially with within the state of Connecticut. Now the bill was passed for financial literacy courses to be provided at a high school level as a requirement for graduation, and we're seeing this trend slowly unfold across the country. Um, Kids are going to be introduced to these financial concepts and the foundations of financial education, but may not have the nuance of understanding how that education applies to them in that moment. They may be looking at it as, well, this is something that I don't have to worry about for years. Or they may be looking at it as, this is something that has absolutely no relevance to me because I'm starving at home. And so no amount of you telling me how to budget is going to make a difference because I don't even make any money, right? And so I think that while there's greater access to information, and certainly it's a two-way street, there's greater access to sharing their experiences with other people in an unfiltered, uncensored kind of a way that connects people and let somebody else know, hey, I'm going through something very similar, or I'm going through the exact same thing. I know what you're going through. Or this is how I cope, right? And so young people are building community faster, and it can have both a positive and a negative effect. But I think we're definitely just over time, but I want to make sure I answered all the questions. Again, all of my contact information is on this slide. And so you can reach out to me. I'm very responsive. Please, please, please complete the survey. Let me know how I did. And I hope this was a good one for you guys. I'm gonna pass it back to Rachel and let her close us out.
Thank you so much, Rahkim. Lots to think about. I think this is going to be something that people will be able to go back to. So we really appreciate you letting us record so that people can take notes and stop and make sure they've got all those tips down. So we really appreciate you taking the time. And I know that a lot of people will be able to benefit from it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.